When the United States announced its strategic Bitcoin reserve on January 23rd, the world reacted as if it were watching a tech milestone unfold. Screens lit up across Wall Street, analysts called it a turning point for American innovation, and Bitcoin's price shot upward as if the future had arrived early, but people mistook the surface for the substance. This order was not crafted for traders or dreamers or early adopters. It was crafted for geopolitics. It marked the moment the US brought Bitcoin out of the speculative shadows and into the realm of national strategy. The message was simple: America intends to shape the next era of global money the same way it shaped the last one. Welcome to Political Plot, where we cut through the noise to reveal the power plays shaping American politics. Today we're diving into how the US move to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve triggered a global currency showdown, forcing China and other nations into a race to accumulate Bitcoin and reshape the future of money. Beijing understood instantly. Within hours, China's top leadership gathered behind closed doors. The Standing Committee does not assemble casually. When it meets, it is because something threatens the strategic balance. They weren't there to debate import data or regional disputes. They were there because Washington had just signaled it would not allow Bitcoin to evolve naturally. It intended to steer it, accumulate it, and potentially weaponize it the same way it weaponized the dollar. To China, that was not a financial curiosity. It was a challenge. For almost 8 decades, the United States has held unmatched power through the dollar. Nations may criticize American policies, but they rely on American currency. Oil, shipping, banking, reserves all orbit the dollar. And when a country angers Washington, access to this system can be taken away with a stroke of a pen. Sanctions freeze reserves. Swift restrictions halt commerce. Banks become unreachable. The world has watched this tool deployed again and again, and every deployment strengthens the desire for an escape hatch. China spent years trying to build one. They pushed the yuan to international markets, negotiated swap lines, settled select trades in their own currency, and expanded their presence in global institutions. But trust is not built through announcements. The world sees how tightly China controls its money supply, how quickly it can shut capital outflows, how easily it can adjust value when politically convenient, and so the yuan remained a regional tool, never a global alternative. Bitcoin was different. It couldn't be printed, seized, or manipulated by any state. It acted like digital gold with no vault to invade and no government to pressure. For China, it represented the first credible way to undermine American monetary dominance without forcing the world to accept Beijing's authority. But there was a problem. If America accumulated Bitcoin aggressively before other nations reacted, it would recreate its dominance in a new form. Instead of dollar hegemony, the world would face Bitcoin hegemony built on American reserves. This scenario terrified Beijing far more than dollar dominance because Bitcoin's fixed supply leaves no room to catch up once you fall behind. That is why China's response was immediate. They turned first to mining. Although China had publicly banned miners years earlier, the ban had always been partial. State-linked operations continued quietly in remote areas where electricity was cheap and oversight was limited. After the American order, those operations expanded from quiet-side projects into national initiatives. Provincial authorities were quietly instructed to allocate unused energy to mining. China produces more electricity than any nation in history, much of it stranded in regions far from major cities. What once went to waste can now be converted into digital reserves. Mining gives China a way to accumulate Bitcoin without entering public markets, without revealing intent, and without depending on international liquidity. But mining alone isn't enough for a nation preparing for monetary rivalry. China also began accumulating through foreign intermediaries. Over-the-counter brokers in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Switzerland have been executing large purchases for unnamed state-linked entities. These acquisitions never hit traditional exchanges, never appear in headlines, and never spook markets. To Beijing, Bitcoin is not an investment. It is a hedge against a world where American influence remains dominant unless deliberately countered. At the same time, China revived the digital yuan. For years, they marketed it as a modern currency built for efficiency and programmable payments. But efficiency alone was never enough to convince the world. Outside China, the digital yuan was seen as a surveillance tool, not a financial innovation. After the US order, Beijing adjusted its framing. They began positioning the digital yuan as partially supported by Bitcoin reserves, a hybrid instrument blending state control with a neutral asset. This makes it appealing to countries frustrated frustrated with the dollar, but unwilling to embrace a purely Chinese currency. Suddenly, the digital yuan is no longer just a political tool. It becomes a vehicle backed by something everyone acknowledges as scarce and censorship-resistant. China then moved to international coordination through BRICS. For years, these nations shared a desire to reduce dollar exposure but lacked alignment. When the US signaled intent to dominate Bitcoin early, that alignment emerged naturally. China proposed establishing a collective Bitcoin reserve to support trade settlement among BRICS members. If successful, it would create a parallel financial structure where nations could transact outside the dollar entirely. Not a replacement all at once, but a slow, deliberate erosion of American monetary reach. Power rarely collapses in a single moment. It dissolves gradually as alternatives become viable. This shift reflects a debate that took place long before Bitcoin existed. In 1944, at the Bretton Woods Conference, the world considered two models. One was a neutral global currency backed by commodities. The other placed the dollar at the center of everything. The dollar model won. Today, Bitcoin is the closest thing to that neutral model ever created, and China understands that neutrality is more attractive globally than dominance. They do not need to control Bitcoin. They only need to prevent America from controlling it. A multipolar system is enough. As this race develops, the world begins to divide into two financial spheres. The Western system continues to rely on the dollar, commercial banking networks, and existing institutions. The Eastern ecosystem grows around Bitcoin-backed trade, BRICS coordination, and the digital yuan. And at the core of both cites Bitcoin as a neutral settlement asset. Neither side trusts the other's fiat currency. Bitcoin becomes the bridge both can tolerate. In this new architecture, China gains leverage it lacked for generations. BRICS nations finally gain a tool that frees them from choosing between Washington and Beijing. Early Bitcoin adopters benefit enormously as states compete for the asset they once accumulated quietly. Central banks buying gold see its value rise alongside Bitcoin as the world reduces trust in traditional money. But not everyone wins. The United States loses the unilateral control it has held since World War II. Dollar holders experience a long, grinding decline in purchasing power. The European Union, too slow to adapt, finds itself caught between two competing financial models. Traditional investors relying on old market assumptions see lackluster returns for years. And those who sold Bitcoin too early watch from the sidelines as the greatest monetary transition of their lifetime leaves them behind. For individuals, this moment is not abstract, it is not academic, it is practical. When governments compete for a finite asset, that asset becomes a focal point of global strategy. But owning Bitcoin is not enough. It must be held securely, away from entities that can be compelled by political pressure. Custody becomes as important as ownership. Patience becomes as important as price. Understanding becomes as important as speculation. The executive order was not a nod to innovation, it was the opening move of a monetary confrontation. China has responded with speed and clarity. The world is reorganizing around a neutral asset neither side controls. And when this transformation is complete, individuals will fall into two categories. Those who hold the asset both superpowers fought to accumulate, or those who hold the currency weakened by the struggle. The direction is clear, the timing is unfolding now, and the decision for each person remains entirely their own.